I grabbed onto it because I thought it was my solution. Getting out of London, getting out of my marriage, moving to a different country, making a lot of money working on these films. That's the solution. Those 3 things are going to make me happy, so I have to make them happen. So I used character defects, I used greed, I used envy. I would look at people in LA making films, making a lot more money than people in London make, and I'd be envious and jealous, and I'd want the car and I'd want the house and I want to live in the sunshine. And I got all those things and they made me miserable because I self-willed it to happen. Hi, and thank you for coming back to my little series about the 12 steps of recovery. This week, I'd like to talk about step 6. Step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So in step 5, when we've spoken about our life story to our sponsor, in step 4, where we've written out our life story to ourselves, we will have noticed patterns of destructive behavior that just keep coming back in our lives and have perhaps always been there. For me, I think these are the things that made us use in the first place. Our sponsor will hopefully be able to identify what the book calls defects of character, which is quite an old-fashioned way of saying character traits that aren't helpful and, for me, make me use. These things very often are based in instinct. The book talks about instincts that once used to protect us back in medieval times have now, in alcoholics, have run riot. They didn't stop. Like when we became civilized, these instincts, these primal instincts like aggression and lust, they haven't been correctly harnessed. Like they've just run wild in addicts, and we constantly need to feel like we are pressing these buttons of the instinctive behavior, which isn't really any use to us in modern society. Some of these character defects have been useful to us in the past, or useful to get out of trouble, or they've been of some use to us and they've given us something because we've held on to them. So that's why step 6 is hard, because some of the things you might not want to get rid of. But step 6 is about becoming ready to have these problems in our lives removed. That might sound a bit confusing, so I'll go into my step 6 a little bit. From what I can remember, it's been a while since I've done step 6, but my character defects that my sponsor recognized in me were selfishness, self-centeredness, dishonesty, jealousy, envy. Those were big ones for me. When he told me about the jealousy one, for example, my immediate reaction when he said we're going to have to work to remove these from your character, I was worried. I was thinking, well, jealousy spurs me on to achieve. If I see someone with a nice car or, a nice house, and I'm jealous and envious of that, I think that spurs me on to be ambitious, and I want those things for myself. And I was worried to leave that. I thought that was serving me, that character defect, jealousy, dishonesty. I thought that I was getting away with things, and I was sort of manipulating the narrative of my life by lying and distorting the truth. And I was like, well, it's got me into certain situations that were good in the end, my lying and being dishonest. So do I really want to get rid of that? Selfishness, that was an easy one. I was like, yeah, selfishness I can see is making my life worse, and I'd like to get rid of that. Self-centeredness, I don't know. Maybe by being self-centered, for some reason I thought that might be helpful. A lot of these character defects, my first instinct was, I don't want to get rid of those. They help me in my life. They've made me successful in certain ways, but looking back on it, the things that I grabbed onto for greed, or grabbed onto for enviousness, or grabbed onto for dishonesty, they never really worked out. Normally there was some sort of bad payoff in the end, like they weren't good for me. I wasn't doing as well as I thought with those character defects. And it took me a few years to work that out. Like certain jobs that I grabbed onto, like I have to get that. The more aggression and grabbing I put on to get those jobs, and normally when I used those character defects and grabbed onto something, it would work. My willpower would get me into these situations, so I'd be like, yeah, I succeeded. But then when I was in those situations, I would be like, this isn't making me happy, and I don't know why. strange, you know, when I came to LA to work with Hans, it's a dream job, it's an absolute dream job, and I self-willed that into happening. Like, I really wanted that. It was really like, the way I got that was not an easy, relaxed thing. It was like, once my marriage in London was falling apart, I couldn't sell my house, it was in like the credit crunch, there was a desperation there, and I desperately wanted to get out of England. There was a desperation. I was holding on to the thought of mainly just getting away from my troubles. So I grabbed, and I was like, this has to work. And it did work. After a year or so of being in that dream job, it wasn't making me happy. My soul was feeling sort of, just my creativity was being a little bit squashed, and I was having to fit into a box of sounding like people that, you know, perhaps I never really liked, how can I put this? My music was used in films accidentally. I made records and people put those records into films. So it was an expression of me creatively that just seemed to work for people's movies. So it was an easy thing. I didn't self-will it, I didn't grab it. I made these records from the heart. They resonated with filmmakers, so they were used in films. And it was an easy, I didn't self-will it. It was, from my point of view, it was my higher power. Just made that happen and gave me an outlet for my creativity, which really gelled and really worked. And it was a beautiful symbiosis, a beautiful marriage of my music with picture. In London, it's very different. I should make a video about the whole music story because it's quite interesting. So after I'd self-willed working on these films with Hans, I get to LA and I realize everyone's got to sound the same here. In these big, like, $100 million blockbusters, you have to sound like Hans Zimmer, and he has his own sound, but then everyone I was working with was trying to sound like him. And you have to sound like film music, and I didn't like film music. I never liked it. I never was a huge film person. I never watched Star Wars. I just was into music. So I was suddenly surrounded by all these people that just wanted desperately to, not putting them down, they were great, some of them were amazing, and some of them naturally made film music, but I'd never wanted to make film music. I happened to make music that was used in films in England. But then I was in this pressure cooker of everyone trying to sound the same, and like, who could sound the same as the other blockbuster, and it was fucking horrible. I didn't feel creative, and it was hard because from the outside everyone's like, you've got a dream job, oh my god, this is amazing. But I just wanted to make my weird little records, and what happened? It led to me using again, because I felt so just unfulfilled. So that's an example, and I will make a video about my whole music journey, because there's interesting, and a lot of people have reached out to me asking for help about getting into the music business, and I suppose I've been pretty successful in that, so I will make a video about it. But anyway, this particular avenue made me very unhappy, even though I grabbed onto it because I thought it was my solution. Getting out of London, getting out of my marriage, moving to a different country, making a lot of money working on these films, that's the solution. Those three things are going to make me happy, so I have to make them happen. So I used character defects, I used greed, I used envy. I would look at people in LA making films, making a lot more money than people in London make, and I'd be envious and jealous, and I'd want the car, and I'd want the house, and I want to live in the sunshine. And I got all those things, and they made me miserable because I self-willed it to happen. What I'm doing now, making videos with Laura, this never was in my plan. This is the opposite of self-will. I never even wanted to be in videos. I was so nervous, and like, I can't act, like I'm not an actor. I don't know how this happened. This was the opposite of me self-willing, and this has made me the happiest of anything I've done, I would say. This and making my little weird records for myself, and I'm gonna, release them occasionally, and doing remixes, stuff like that. So that's an example of how I used my character defects to get something which didn't make me happy. So you could argue my character defects, I should have been ready to have them taken away, because if they weren't there, I would never have made that decision, but I would never have self-willed that bad situation. So that's good for me to talk about with you. See, this is like a meeting for me. Me telling you that makes me go, oh yeah, that's step 6. I've never connected those two things until I spoke to you now about the Hans Zimmer thing and trying to get out of London and the self-will that was involved and desperately trying to get away from a bad situation and how it made me miserable. So that's pretty interesting. No disrespect to Hans, I love Hans, and you know, it's no disrespect to anyone who's trying to make film music. I'm sure it's, you know, some people love that. It's not me, it's not for me. So that was an example of certain character defects. Selfishness, self-seeking. I wasn't thinking about my ex in this thing. I was just about myself getting out of London. Enviousness of people who lived here making big blockbuster movie soundtracks. So become ready to have those removed. I'm saying now I'm at a point where I can see how these things are not helping me. I don't know where you are on this journey. Perhaps if you've been through these steps with me, you can see your character defects. If you're working with a sponsor, they'll be able to tell you, and you can see, hopefully you can avoid my mistake of wanting to hold on to these character defects. But step 6 is just about becoming ready to live without them. You know, are you ready to let them go? Are you ready to let things like lustfulness, selfishness, self-seeking, greed, laziness, everyone's are different, but they all fall into those sort of categories. Are you ready to let them go? Some are easier to be ready to let go than others. Yeah, this has been an interesting one. So that's step 6. I hope you are doing well. I hope you are getting through these crazy times without having to use excessively. A lot of people have reached out to me saying they've found themselves in trouble because of the pandemic and because of the lockdown. So, you know, my heart goes out to you. I think we're going to have a lot of people struggling with alcoholism and drug addiction right now because we're all stuck at home. But maybe we can keep doing these every week, because this is like a meeting for me. From what you're telling me, it's helping you, so I feel like it's a good thing that's happening. Okay, let's do a couple of questions. Oh, and remember, Stephen Hilton with a PH 23 is my handle on Twitter. Send me your questions there so that I can answer them. Toria BD says, do you sponsor? I do, and I have sponsored. I love to sponsor people. I haven't done it as much as I should, and I've had a lot of unsuccessful attempts to sponsor. I've probably had about 3 or 4 or more of those. I think that's a heartbreaking thing about sponsoring, is most people do go out. I think that they say that the amount of addicts that want to get sober that actually get sober is like 5 or 10%, I think. So it's a low number. So you have to realize with sponsoring, a lot of people are going to go out. A lot of people aren't going to get it. But there was one guy, the last person I sponsored, it was incredible. He got it, and he's still sober, and it makes me very proud to say that. I don't want to talk too much about him because it's an anonymous program. I can tell you I'm in the program, but I can't tell you other people are in the program. That's what I was taught. So yeah, the sponsoring is probably one of the most incredible parts of the program. When I was sponsoring this guy, I was struggling with depression a lot, and every time I would meet him, I wouldn't be depressed because I'd be talking about him and not me. And I would drive there depressed and go, this isn't going to work this time. I'm too depressed to even do this. I don't want to go and speak to him. He's annoying. You're not, if you're watching, you're not annoying. But at that time, you know, it was tough to get you to do what you were bloody told. Anyway, joking. Every time I sat with this guy, I would feel better. And it's really humbling, and I mean, it's incredible to see people change and do the work and get better. There's nothing like it in the world. And yeah, I just wish that it would happen for more people. So yes, I do sponsor, and I love sponsoring. Puppy Baby says, how do you stay consistent? Accountability keeps me consistent. I feel like Laura keeps me consistent. I feel like being asked to speak at meetings or going to meetings keeps me consistent. Sponsor keeps me consistent, and I don't have one of those at the moment, and I really need to get one. So other people keep me consistent in recovery, and my higher power as well. So yeah, prayer, meditation, and other people keep me consistent. That's it for this week. I love you guys. Thank you for helping me stay sober this week. This is like a meeting for me, talking to you. I hope you're getting something out of this. Thank you for the amazing messages. I read them all. You may not believe it, but I do read them all. I can't respond to everyone, but I read them all. And send me questions on Twitter for next week, step 7. Yeah, speak to you soon. Bye. Have a good week.